Okay, looks like we're on Facebook and we're on Zoom and soon we'll be on YouTube. Wow, we're all over the place. But we're all here. We're all at Har Sinai receiving the Torah, according to the Ramban. So let's make this a little more comfortable for everybody. There we go. All right. This is not an advertisement. Tomorrow is a fast day, so it's important to be hydrated. All right. Asara B'Tevet. We're on a very holy time in the Jewish calendar. The Asara B'Tevet, the day that Nebuchadnezzar surrounded the walls of Yerushalayim, forcing everybody inside. Just a few months later, he will come into Yerushalayim and destroy the temple, the first temple, and begin the Babylonian exile. That was a very significant moment in Jewish history, and our survival is based on the fact that throughout all of these kinds of troubles, Hashem is always with us. And Hashem should be with us tonight as well, as we just 100 miles north of us, there are fires burning, threatening the Jewish communities. Right now, the yeshiva that my son went to years ago is under evacuation orders. So in Calabasas, so it's a serious situation over there, and we should hopefully the learning of Torah will be a schut for them and for us, and everything will be safe. So let's get right into it. Parsha Vayechi is the last parsha of Sefer Bereshit, the end of Genesis. We, at the end of the reading, at the end of the seventh reading on Shabbat, God willing, we'll be saying Chazak, Chazak, V'nit Chazek, that special prayer that's reserved for the person that gets that aliyah. And we indeed, there's a lot to say on the parsha. We have several years worth of classes already on our YouTube channel, hours and hours of hopefully edifying, educational, pedagogical classes that are inspiring as well. And so we'll add to that a fourth hour of Torah right now with the addition of this class. First, I'm going to share my source sheet that I have sent to you by email. If you have not received it, let me know, and we'll go from there. All right. So the second verse of this week's parsha deals with the death of Yaakov, and it says V'yikruvu Yemei Yisrael lamut, and the days of Yisrael have been gathered to die. It's a fancy way of saying it was time for him to go. Yisrael, it's another name for Yaakov. Sometimes the Torah uses Yisrael, sometimes Yaakov. We've gone over famous Rav Hirsch on what the differences are. There's plenty of other commentaries as well. Or Chaim on this week's parsha talks about why different names for Yaakov or Yisrael are used at different times. Whether it has to do with his mood, or whether it has to do with whether we're talking about a national message or a personal message, that could have something to do with it. Anyway, so it says here that it's time for him to die. Vikru livno, he called for his son. Which son? Yosef. He called for Yosef to come. He said to him, Im na matzati chen be'inecha, if I have found favor in your eyes, sim na yadcha tachet yirechi, put your hand under my thigh, which is one of the ways they used to use for making somebody swear. Of course, we have that by when Abraham had Eliezer go and find a wife for his son Yitzchak earlier in the Torah, earlier in this book that we're about to finish. V'asita imadi chesed ve'emet, and do for me chesed and emet, do for me kindness and truth. Right, we're going to deal with that word chesed in shortly. And most importantly, al na tikbrini b'Mitzrayim. make sure I'm not buried in Mitzrayim. V'shachanti im avotai, bury me with my fathers, all right? U'nesatani mi Mitzrayim, and take me out of Egypt. Ukvaratani b'kvuratam, and bury me in their burial place. Presumably, as Rashi tells us, he's talking about Marat HaMachpelah, the tomb where Avraham and Yitzchak were already buried in Hebron, still there today. So bury me there, seemingly, that's what he's saying. And Yosef tells him, I will do as you said. I will follow your rules. Now, although I've been sort of translating this according to Rashi so far, and there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. Of course, Rashi gives the Pashut Pshat, the simple explanation. There are still several things that perhaps are not so Pashut. For example, right, he says, V'shachanti im avotai, right, when I'm going to lie down with my fathers. At that point, listen to this, Unisatani mi Mitzrayim, take me out of Egypt. And then ukvartani b'kvuratam, bury me in that burial place. So wait a minute. I'm going to lie down with my fathers, who are where? Again, presumably Hebron. At that point, when I'm laying with my fathers in Hebron, take me out of Egypt. He's either in Hebron or he's in Egypt. He has to make up his mind. But you're not going to be taken out of Egypt before you're dead. He wants to die and lie with his fathers, seemingly to be buried, but then be taken out of Egypt. And then it says, bury me in their resting place. Now we're totally lost. What exactly is he asking him to do, and why in this particular order? So the Seforno has a brilliant explanation, but we're going to need to look at his explanation for both of these verses. Because all of this, even Rashi says this, all of this is a plan that Yaakov has to not be buried in Egypt. What we don't understand, what we don't know unless we look at it a little more carefully, is that the burial in Egypt was an almost for sure thing if he hadn't done a few things. In other words, he needed to put certain actions into place in order to not really be buried in Egypt, for that to not happen. And so he says, that in the beginning, the very first thing he says, if I have found favor in your eyes, do for me a kindness. And what's that kindness? Al natik barini b'Mitzrayim. Do not bury me in Egypt. Says his forno, afilo be'aron be'inyan v'yishan be'aron b'Mitzrayim. When I say don't bury me in Egypt, says Yaakov to Yosef, I don't mean that I don't want to touch, I'm afraid of touching Egyptian land. Even in an aron, even in a casket, even in a mausoleum, I don't want to be in Egypt. Why? Says Esforno, she'im tasa kain afilu l'shah. Because if you were to do that, if you were going to bury me even for a moment in Egyptian land, lo yinichucha l'holichene milamara. They won't let you take me out. She'omru zeh maspik k'mo shehaya minhag etzlam. Because once you bury me, that once you put me down in the ground, right? Even for a moment, even for a few seconds, they're not going to let you take me out and bury me later on in Marat HaMachpelah. Because they're going to say that me being put into this coffin is enough. You buried him. Okay, leave him alone. What kind of disrespect for Yaakov? Even the Egyptians respected Yaakov. Even Paro blessed him, right? According to the Midrash, according to Rashi brought earlier, the famine ended when Yaakov came into Egypt. People assumed he was a very holy man, They're not going to just let you just take him out of the ground. So that's part of the elaborate plan he has. But there's more. Because then he says, as Forno says, V'shachanti im avatai, and bury me with my fathers. Let me rest with my when I rest with my fathers. Now we assume that means when he dies. But he says here that that this is inyan shechivat hamed alavotav hu hanachat mitat hamed b'makom hamafsed u'v'savuv hasovdim. ולכן נכתב זה הלשון בכל המלאכים צדיקים רשעים שמתו על מיתתם בספר מלאכים. In Sefer Malachim, in the book of Kings, where even good kings and bad kings existed, when they died, there was an official ceremony. They didn't just get buried like everybody else. They had just like in America today for one former president, right? There was a state assembly. There was a state funeral. It was a whole big deal. So when he says, when I lie down with my fathers, that means when that happens, when I'm placed on my on the bier, right? Bier, right? When I'm placed on my deathbed, that's going to be, transported everywhere, and people are going to say eulogies around me and everything else. When that happens, so it's not like Rashi says that this means that when he dies, it's when he is put on that bier, right? At that point, so continues Sforno, nishchati mimitzrayim kasher tasa ba'ofen zeh tocha l'seit oti mimitzrayim ki kasher yimlu yimei hashchiva yisur yigoni milbam ki inin v'yavru yimei b'chito v'lo yimchu bach ki tishani el eretz achareha. Right? So again, if you do this, right? If you let me, kasher tasa, when you do that, when you carry me around in this big, fancy state affair, right? Where everybody's going to see me on my deathbed and say eulogies about me and stuff, that's going to be good. Not because he wants all the honor, he wants people to say good things about him, but because once that happens, people will say, he honored his father. He didn't treat him like a shmata. He's a good boy. He does what he's supposed to do. In this case, he's supposed to do like a state funeral for him. He did that. He didn't bury him. He didn't bury him too quickly, right? He didn't put him in the ground and take him out. None of that happened. He treated him respectfully. At that point, then you can take me out. Then you can take me out of Egypt and bring me to Eretz Yisrael, because people will say, check, one more on the abacus. He did what he was supposed to do. He's Yotzi. He's fulfilled his obligation of honoring his father. He did what he was supposed to do. And now he wants to take him to some other land. Okay, fine. He'll take him to some other land. This doesn't, I don't know, fit is the right word. But we're going to see the Oznaim LaTorah has a little different comment later on. We can just keep that in mind. But the point here being that Yaakov, all the things that Yaakov is asking for aren't just random things. He's not just using different metaphors and different nicknames for death, as it seems Rashi wants to say. He's telling Yosef a direct plan for how he can get Yaakov out of Mitzrayim. It's not going to be an easy thing. It's not just a simple, like, bury anybody anywhere you want kind of thing. Yaakov has taken on a hero status, almost like demigod in Egyptian mythology. And they're not just going to let such a person just up and be taken away unless certain things have to happen, and he gives these instructions about exactly what needs to happen. He needs to be buried in such and such a way. He needs to be carried around in such and such a way. And when that's done, and the Egyptians say, he's honored him the way he should be honored, then they can say, okay. Then they're going to turn around. They're going to be done. They're going to go on to the next piece of news, the next ball game, or whatever else is going on. They're going to ignore what happens, and Yosef can sneak Yaakov out of Egypt and take him to Eretz Yisrael to be buried as he wants. That's pretty much the way the Sforno seems to read these verses, and I think it fits very nicely. Now, a beautiful idea. Now, this is if the Khatam Sofer hadn't said this himself, I wouldn't be able to even say this. It's really amazing. Part of his instructions to Yosef were Asita imadi chesed ve'emet. Do for me kindness and truth. So what's this chesed? Usually, and this is where many people get the idea that chesed she'otim im hametim hu chesed shel emet. Do for me kindness. And so what many people say is that not only is burial a kindness, it's the only true kindness. It's a chesed shel emet. And you'll hear this in a lot of Jewish funerals. Rabbis will say this all the time. Well, this is the greatest kind of kindness because you're doing a favor for somebody that they're not going to be able to repay. But the problem is, yes, you're not going to get anything from that person. However, Musar Amarti Lika Chesed Shel Emet Ba'olam. There is no real. The Gemara says that there is no real true chesed in the world. You can't really do kindness completely selflessly at all in this world. Ki al hakol yesh tashlum schar. You're going to get some sort of payment. Filu schar shicha na ve'ein hakadosh baruch hu mapkeach scharo. But the truth is that yes, you're not going to get paid back from this person, but you'll get paid back from Hashem. Right? Hashem knows what you did. You did a mitzvah. You did a mitzvah, the mitzvah of burial. And so Hashem is going to reward you like he rewards everybody who does mitzvah. All right? So how could this be a chesed shel emet? Why do we call this the greatest chesed? Oh, I'm not going to get any reward for this. Yeah, you will. You might not get reward from the guy or the girl because, they can't really do anything for you. But somebody will. Hashem will. Hashem takes care of people. There's a story people tell about these two rabbis who were traveling, or they were, I guess they were lost, and somehow they were looking for a Jewish community. This is I don't know, probably within the last 50 years or so. Driving around, they can't find anything. Except they finally driving by, and they see a cemetery with Hebrew writing on the tombstones. And they figure it's a Jewish cemetery, so they need to find directions. They'll go inside. They'll ask if there's anybody Jewish around. They'll find it. Obviously, there's a Jewish community somewhere nearby, right? Or so they assume. So they drive in and they see indeed there's a funeral going on. They go in to participate. They happen to have made the minyan. There were only 8 men. With these two rabbis, now made 10. They had a minyan, and there was a guest book to sign, as there often are these things. They signed their names, and they went about their business. Eventually, they got to where they're supposed to go. About 2 months later, they both get a check in the mail, some huge amounts, some $100,000 each. Apparently, the person who died had left money. Died very wealthy, had a lot of money hidden in their in their blankets and under their mattresses, and these two gentlemen, these two rabbis got some of the money because the person said in the will it said to give money to to divvy up the will to the people who participated in the funeral. So they got this money. The point being, again, yes, you can't chesed shalemet. Okay, beautiful. You're doing somebody a favor that they're not going to pay you back for. But here you see you do get paid back. Hashem pays you back through the person or through some other messenger. Anyway, um, uh, so that's so. Uh, and also Yaakov lo Amar Asita Imadi Chesed Shel Emet Ela Chesed VeEmet. Also, he didn't say all these people who are making this drasha, who are making this point of this Chesed is truth, the truest kind of Chesed, the truest kind of real kindness. That's not the point. He said Ela. What did he say? Chesed VeEmet. These are two separate things: truth and kindness. Perusha Ramban, the pasuk. Ketonti Mikol HaChasadim. In the verse it says where Yaakov says, "I've become small from all the kindnesses you've done for me." Look over there. Anyway, so he says here. He continues, "Ach HaChesed she'osim im hametim harashayim shemit chesed im chavro yoter mizeh." So the only kind of chesed shel emet, the only time that it's true that you're not going to get paid back for doing this mitzvah of kavura is when you're honoring somebody who perhaps should not be honored. There are evil people in the world. Baruch Hashem, we don't have too many people like that nowadays. But to go and honor an evil person, that is not a mitzvah. In fact, says the Chatam Sofer, that might be almost an avera. Yeah, it's you're honoring evil. Zehu b'vadai chesed shel emet. But he says that is a chesed shel emet. That's truly chesed. That's a person who is completely using their chesed, it's completely selflessly, on pain of suffering, on pain of possible even punishment. They're going to a funeral. They're going to a funeral of an evil person. Lo levad she'ein lo tashlum gamul me'akadosh baruch Hu. Hashem is not going to reward such a person. Ela onish. It's he might it might punish him. La chesed im hascharia harehu ochesha asher achzari. We're not supposed to honor the evil people in the world. So you know where it's true that it's a chesed shel emet? It's when you say, Hashem is going to punish me for doing this, but I really feel this person needs to be honored. I need to go to this funeral. That is where that's where you're doing the chesed completely, truly. You're doing the chesed even where it's perhaps not a chesed. This is a very difficult concept to really wrap your head around. But think about it like this. The Torah is mostly broken down into different kinds of mitzvot. Those mitzvot between man, and those mitzvot between man and Hashem. Those two kind of things, right? So, say the more quote-unquote ritualistic things, Shabbat, they're supposedly less to do with other people, right? It's all about your relationship with Hashem, right? If you're fasting tomorrow, nobody else is going to be affected by that necessarily. I mean, if you're mean to people because you're fasting, that's not a good idea either. But most people won't know if you're fasting or not. Hashem knows, right? When you wake up in the morning and you say Moda'ani, nobody else is affected by that Moda'ani necessarily. I mean, we can go into deeper things where the whole world is affected by the mitzvot that are done. The Nefesh HaChaim writes about this. Okay. And then there's those mitzvot that are between you and other people, right? That are less ritualistic and more, let's call them humanistic, for lack of a better word, right? They're about how kind you can be. So you can be very, very kind. But that chesed has limits. There's certain times when somebody uses their chesed incorrectly, their kindness. Classic example. We're going to have the holiday of Purim coming up soon. It has a lot to do with the descendant, Esther being the descendant of Shaul, the first king of Israel, who lost his kingship, lost his life, mostly because of a sin he did where he was too kind to the king of Amalek and he let him live, right? And by letting him live, Amalek was able to then survive, eventually leading to Haman and the threat to Jewish existence during the Persian exile right after the Babylonian exile. So it was kind. It was a kind thing to do, not killing the king, not killing off Amalek. Maybe it's kind, but kindness has limits. We don't always do what's kind. Here, what the Khatam Sofer is talking about is you're not going to get a mitzvah for this particular funeral that you're attending. You know you're not going to get a mitzvah for this. But if you genuinely feel compassion, you really feel for this person, right? You somehow understand where they're coming from. And in your heart, you know that this person could use your presence at the funeral. You should go. You should do it. It might not be a mitzvah. It might even be in a very, you might even get punished for it. But the punishment will be very different than somebody else who's doing it against Hashem. You're not trying to fight with Hashem here. You're trying to express your real concern for the human beings, for the beautiful creation that Hashem made. All human beings are the children of Hashem, and all of them deserve some love and affection, and of course, respect that is due to all people who are made b'tselem Elokim in the image of Hashem, as it said in the beginning of this very book that we're about to finish. All right, let's keep going. That was all on just the very, very beginning of the parsha. There's a lot to say, Baruch Hashem. Let's go a little further, see where we could go. Chapter 47, verse 31. 2 verses later. We're still pretty much in the beginning. So then Yaakov has Yosef swear that he's going to do this. V'yomer b'hishava li v'yishava lo. He says, swear to me. Yosef does. V'yishtachu Yisrael al rosh hamita. And Yisrael, that's the father again, right? Bow down to the head of the bed. The head of the bed? What a strange place to bow down, no? So says Rashi famously. So it says Al Rosh Hamita. He says Hafach Atzmo. He turned himself around. He was obviously facing his son, like sitting up on the pillow, whatever. He turned around, Letzad Hashchina, in the direction of the Shechina, in the direction of Hashem. Right? Mikan Omru. This is one of the sources to the idea that we have, that the sages have, Shashchina lemala rishotav shel chola, that the Shechina is above the head of the sick person. In other words, by the head of the bed. So he has to turn around to bow down to the Shechina. Davar acher al rosh hamita. Another opinion is, what does it mean towards the head of the bed? Al shahaita mitato shalema. He was happy. He didn't bow down towards the bed. He bowed down because of the bed. Al shahaita mitato shlema, because his bed was complete. In what way was it complete? In what way was his bed complete? In the fact that, right, Shelo haya ba rasha, none of those children were evil. Yosef melechu, you see, Yosef was a ruler. V'o shenishba levein hagoyim, and he was amongst, despite the fact that he was living amongst the Egyptian corrupt society of this whole time. Nevertheless, hooray, who all made b'tzedakah, b'tzidko, he still he was able to survive and be holy. So says Rashi. Those nine Latorah, Zaman Sorotskin, asks the question. He quotes this Rashi that Yaakov bowed down to the bed because he recognized that his children are so great that his bed is complete, and so he bows down. Then he asks the question, Lama davka atara Yaakov. What did he see right now? In other words, he's been in Egypt for 17 years. He has seen Yosef. He has seen that Yosef has survived the corrupt Egyptian society and that none of his children fell away. That's already happened. That's already been happening. What happened just now that makes him want to do this bowing down business? So he says, Ger hamolech be'eretz nachriya mishtadel lirot lakol. As many of us know, as immigrants to another country, I'm a first-generation immigrant, was not born here, right? What do immigrants want to do? They want to become as Americanized as possible. I saw somebody recently, this because it was the holiday season, quote unquote. I saw driving on the freeway. I saw, presumably, might have been a Sikh, might have been another Indian group of some sort. He had a turban on his head. He was driving a minivan, and the minivan was covered in antlers and the green and red lights, right? The whole thing wrapped around the car, right? It's in the holiday spirit. Which holiday, doesn't matter. Why is he doing it? Doesn't matter. Is he gonna go home and thank Hashem for thank Hashem, thank his gods for the birth of Jesus? Probably not, right? That's probably not his religion. But it's holiday season, and that's what Americans do. And immigrants especially want to be as Americanized as possible. So that's what the Reb Zalman Sorotskin is saying here. Shehu kshur arzu hachadasha, wants to connect himself to the new land. B'chol nime nafsho. Sorry, give me a second. All right. All right. So he wants to connect himself in every way possible to this new land. Oma ha'osho his wealth, im yachol yirod be'etzba al kever aviv ba'arzo hachadasha. And of course, he's going to want to bury his father in this new land. Rotzoloma shehu kvar dor sheni ba'aretz. He's second generation. As Ezra Gamor Yachshav B'chol Ofen Yasa Moshe Kazeh Mishaga, and especially a ruler, right? Especially somebody who wants to, kibitz and schmooze and rub elbows with the big important people, right? And not be off-putting in any way, not to estrange himself. He'd be crazy. He'd be meshuga to want to bury his father in another land. Im yasa et aviv v'niftar etzlo, or to go bury his father in the land that he came from. Sha'al yidei zeh yevinu hakol. He's going to lose everything. Sheyesh lo od ga'aguyim moladatam v'lo nita'at na'aklam He's going to lose all of his influence. He's going to lose all of his friends in this new land if he goes and buries his father in the Alterheim, in the old motherland, right? V'amru alav, and they said to him, "Achar ba legur v'yashvei shava." And after you're going to come back and be our judge? Who are you? You're just an Israeli. You're not American anymore, right? You're not Egyptian anymore. You're just an Israelite. You're Hebrew. V'chach natiro Yaakov she Yosef lo yitratza b'chol ofen lo yishtadel lasot oto le'eretz Canaan u'kvoro sham. He saw that Yosef promised him that he's going to bury him in Canaan, despite everything. He might lose it all. He might not have any influence. He might not be viceroy anymore, but he's willing to do it. And that's when Yaakov realized, my bed is complete. My children are amazing. And he's not at all afraid to give it all up and swear that he's going to take care of this. And is this that made Yaakov so grateful to Hashem, that indeed it became very clear that his children were going to go in the right direction. So, and that's, by the way, he concludes with this idea. By the way, it doesn't say he bowed down to the bed. It says he bowed down to the head of the bed, to the Rosh. Shafilu Harosh HaMalach HaGoe'el, that this king, this viceroy of Egypt, this Yosef, who has so much power, even that he's willing to give up to do the right thing. That's when Yaakov realizes that indeed his children aren't going to do anything wrong, that they're going to go in the right direction. Okay. Later on, not too much later, chapter 48, verse 1. This is after that blessing. He leaves, and then he's called back. And after all these things, Yosef, well, be careful. Behold, your father is sick. And he went and took his two sons with him at Menashe and Efrayim. He took Menashe and Ephraim to get those blessings that we're going to be talking about in just a moment. Writes the Torah Tamima. Torah Tamima basically involves himself with finding quotes, attaching quotes in the Torah to Talmudic teachings about them. So there's an interesting Talmudic teaching that he wants to tell us, that, behold, your father is sick. This is the first time in the Torah the word chole is used, sick. There's a reason for it. It says, Tanya, ad Yaakov lo haveh chulsha. Until Yaakov, nobody was ever sick. Ata Yaakov evia rachme v'haveh chulsha. Yaakov wanted some signs that he was dying, so he asked Hashem to make him sick when he was getting old and about to die. And as it says in our verse, behold, your father is getting sick. Your father is sick. So this is, by the way, for people who haven't heard this before, this is sort of like mind-boggling. Nobody, there's 200, almost 2,200 years of history at this point. Actually, 2,255 years of history. That's how old the world. That was the year that Yaakov died. The year 2,255, and it's in yeah. We can say more about that number some other time. V'lo nidbar. So it writes the Torah Tamima. Lo nidbar be'en muchar zeh pasuk zeh. What the Talmud does not tell you, well, it tells you that nobody was sick before. It doesn't tell you how this verse proves that nobody's been sick before. Nobody's been sick before, but how do you know that? The Talmud says it like, so from this verse, it's clear. Your father is sick. So how could somebody be sick before that? Just because it never mentioned it before doesn't mean it never happened before. So it says the Torah Tamima, Ve'efshar lomer Api hanachug midot anashim bale midot. Good people, people who are careful about how they behave. Lachzor libasa b'sura ra befurash. They try their hardest not to say bad news out just like that. Just like, oh, your mother died, your father died. There's a whole story, right? There's a Gemara in Pesachim that Rabbi Eliezer asked Rabbi Chia about how his father's doing, and he says, "Why didn't you ask about your mother?" And from that, Rabbi Chia knew that both his father and his mother died. Inekan Hayav Magid Bezeh, Efrayim ben Yosef, and especially here where it says Rashi tells us that this news was given to Yosef by his son Ephraim, who was probably a good kid, a person who tried to work on himself. He was taught these ideas of derech eretz, of not just blurting out bad news. Imkain lo liyosef mefurash shaviv chola ela beinyan nirmas. So he wouldn't have told his father that his grandfather is sick the way it says it in the Torah so clearly. He would have hinted to it. But how are you going to hint to it, says the Torah to Mima, if it's never happened before? There's something else you can hint to. If somebody else was sick once ever before, say Abraham had gotten sick, you'd say something like, it's so sad what happened to Abraham so many years ago that he was sick. And then, you kind of get the idea that Yaakov is sick. But there wasn't any reference point to attach it to. There was nothing to hang it on to. So since there wasn't anybody else who's ever been sick before, that's why he couldn't hint to it. That's why he said it out so clearly, which is not the normal way of speaking. And that's how the Talmud knew that nobody had been sick before from this verse. That's a beautiful Torah Tamima there. I'm sure that we could say more on that later. Sorry. All right. So then he gives them the famous bracha. This is a bracha that we have songs to, and we say some people we say it in our bedtime Shema, and some people say it to their children. Most people, I think, sing it to their children. There are different tunes for it. Chapter 48, verse 16. HaMalach HaGoe'el usim mikol ra. The angel who had saved me from all evil. Yivarech et hane'arim, should bless these children. Or Chaim says HaMalach doesn't mean an angel in this case. It means the Torah and mitzvot, because an angel doesn't have individual power to bless anything. So why would we ask for an angel to bless something? Right? So your behavior is what blesses you. V'yikara v'hem shemi, and he should bless these children, and they should be called by my name, v'shem avotai, and in the name of my fathers, Avraham v'Yitzchak, v'yidgu larov b'kerev ha'aretz. So they should become like fish. They should grow as many as fish within the land, which is not usually a good thing for fish to be on the land, but that's what the verse says. So it's a very strange verse, and of course there are a number of different interpretations and what it means. Just for a Hasidic thought, today we'll have something from a grandfather and grandson today, from the Chidush Arim and from the Sfat Emet. So this is from the Chidush Arim. He says, "V'yidgu larov b'kerev ha'aretz." He quotes the verse, "The Midrash Perush kig dagim hapotchim pichem tipat mayim," like fish that open up their mouths and drink in water. Ki'ilu lo tamu, as if they don't taste it. And they get it, they just get water and water and water and water and water, and it's not even going through them. It's just it's not going into them at all. Hainu af shehem mikerev haaretz, And that's what it means that they should be on the land. The al korcham osim masim gashmiim. On the land is where you do physical activity. Bikomakom yehei ikar hachiyut laHashem yitbarach k'mashekatuv heim chayinu. We live in this world. We have physical drives and physical bodies, but that's not us. The real you is your soul. And this body is just a temporary piece of clothing that you're wearing for 60, 70, 80, 120 years. But your soul is what's forever. Your soul has what's called nitzchiyut. It has eternity. That being the case, just like fish take in water, so too we take in mitzvot. And we might not notice it in this physical world, but that's what we're living on. That's what we're really getting our life from. That's what we're breathing. We're breathing mitzvot. We're breathing the kindness and the Torah that we learn. Okay. Yehuda, right, heard an interesting story. It's a quote really from a book. Is it, the author's name is Foster, I think. Just look it up real quick. Sorry for the delay. Yeah, David Foster Wallace wrote a book called This Is Water. Different essays. And one of the basically the little anecdote that it's based on is based on this idea that there's these two fish swimming around. Somebody gets into the pool or gets into the water next to the fish and says to them, "So guys, how's the water?" Right? And so the one fish turns to the other fish and says, "What's water?" Right? We don't necessarily recognize what we're living in. This world or whatever it is the main thing in our lives. We don't always necessarily recognize it. So this is the Chidush HaRum is saying the same thing here. It's true about Vayid Gula Rov. Why this the same idea that our real chiyut, our real life comes from the mitzvot we do, and we don't realize that that's really our water. Everything else is just it's just other stuff. Okay, let's see if we can try to fit in two more ideas in the time we have left. So then he gives the blessings. Then Yaakov gives blessings to all of his sons. This is probably the central event of the parsha where he blesses all of his children. And one of the sons is his name is Yehuda. And it says, Yehuda ata yeducha achecha yodcha b'oref oivecha yishtachavu lecha b'nei avicha. So he says, the Torah says, you Yehuda, Yaakov tells Yehuda, your son, your brothers will recognize you, right? Yeducha achecha, they will know you. And then a couple of metaphors, your hand is going to be on the neck of your enemies, and your father's sons are going to bow down to you. All right. So Sfat Emet writes that the Midrash Yehuda Ata Yeducha Yachacha Kulam Nikru Al Shmecha Yehudim. Midrash says that when it says your brothers will recognize you, it means they will take your name. All the Jewish people will take the name Yehuda, which is true because we are called Yehudim. We are many people throughout the world for many generations have called us something to the effect of Yud, Yid, Yehuda. Right? We're all Yehudim, Jews. Yaakov Olav Shalom Ktiv Beit Biyud Titen Emet Yaakov Who Matana Ba'alma Deshikra. Yaakov is Emet. Yaakov is given this characteristic of truth. Ach b'nei Yisrael, hey ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim. And we are, true story, we are believers, the sons of believers. U'b'zu ha'amuna yachol kol ish Yisrael l'hitvadeg be'emet. It's through that faith that we're able to connect the truth that Yaakov got, because he knew what truth was. He learned Torah. He had communication with Hashem. We connect to that through him. V'zehu b'china behoda moda al ha'emet liyot nimshach al kol panim achar ha'emet. This is a reason for us. We recognize truth. That's what makes us Yehudim. The word hoda, which usually is translated as thanks, thanking somebody for something, or thanking Hashem for something, is just really recognizing. Right? When we thank somebody, we're just basically recognizing that they gave us something, that we're not all alone, that we're not self-made. Right? That we have something, we have somebody or something taking care of us. Al yidei habrachot v'hodot v'shvachot b'peh zochim al ha'emet. And through this, through thanking with our mouths, we are connecting to that truth. We are saying what's true by recognizing that Hashem is giving us stuff. That's what the whole power of our mouths is, just to give thanks to Hashem and to recognize that He has given us what we have. So this is why David HaMelech, who's descendant from Yehuda, had the power to write such powerful psalms and Tehillim that recognize and inspire our gratitude to Hashem. V'zeh koach hapeh niftach Shin Kuf. I don't know what that is. L'chein nemar bo tov lahodot laHashem, and that's why we say, Shabbat, right? Sorry, Shabbat Kodesh. So this power of the mouth we use, especially on Shabbat Kodesh, as we'll be saying tomorrow night. L'chein nemar bo tov lahodot laHashem. That's why we say on Shabbat the tov lahodot, the psalm of the Sabbath is that phrase. It's good to thank Hashem. It's good to recognize Hashem, because that's the Shabbat sahaduta ikri. The Shabbat is all about really that recognition of Hashem's creation, of testifying to the fact that Hashem made the entire world and rested on the seventh day, and that's what makes us Yehudim. We're not just Yehudim because we just took Yehuda's name. We took Yehuda's name because we are people who recognize, people who are descended from this truth. And the truth is, the only truth that really holds everything together is that there's one God and that He loves this world. And by recognizing that, we become the Yehudim by Hodah, by recognizing. That's what makes us Yehudim. I guess Yehudim could be translated as recognizers, right? All right. So last piece, I just want to finish off the parsha and the sefer. At the very, very end of the book, Yosef's brothers are worried that he perhaps still holds a grudge against them for selling him and for losing his childhood, basically. Yosef, and this is chapter 50, verses 19 to 21. Says Yosef says to them, Yosef, Al tiro, don't be afraid. Am I other than God? Can I do something? Can I undo something that God wanted to do? You wanted to do bad to me. Hashem wanted to do good. So He did good, and I'm here. And because of this, a lot of people are able to survive. And my being put here into Egypt through whatever channels, has ended up being good for the majority of people. And now, al tiru, don't be afraid. Anochi achalkel etchem v'tabchem yinachem otam v'daber al libam. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to take care of your children. And he calmed them down with his words. That's pretty much the end of that. Orach Chaim, short piece. Orach Chaim from Morocco, about 150 years ago, writes like this: Hareh zeh doma shemitkaven lahashkod chavero kos mod mavet v'hashkichu kos yain she'enu mitchayev klum. Hareh hem pturim zakayim gam b'dinei shemayim. So this could be compared to somebody who gives his friend a kos mavet, a cup of death, and a poisoned cup, right? And he wants to kill him, but yishkuhu kos yain, and switched it by accident with a cup of wine. So in that case, what happens to him? According to the law, you didn't kill him. Attempted murder, maybe, but you don't kill anybody. Lo mechayev klum. Orehem pturim is a kayim gam b'dinei shemayim. Even in the heavenly court, the brothers didn't do anything wrong, because even if they wanted to do him harm, says Yosef is basically telling them, even if you wanted to do me harm, you didn't do anything bad, because it ended up being good. And that's kind of an important lesson, I think, for all of us in life. We see a poison cup that somebody might have given us, something that might have been bad. But what the truth really is that somewhere along the line it will lead to something good. And if that's even through bad people, sometimes good things come, right? So bad events, terrible things, a fire, or whatever else happens, God forbid, it's always you don't just see it as bad. You try to find, even in that, some sort of opportunity for good. Perhaps are doing chesed and inviting the evacuees to our homes, maybe, or whatever it is that we can do to help. Maybe there's going to be cleaning up to do it that we can volunteer for. All of that is God willing to come, and we should only see good news and as they say, recognizable good news in all of our efforts. Thank you very much. Have a good rest of your week, and Shabbat Shalom.